Abogado. It is a pleasure for me to be a moderator of a discussion regarding the pioneer environments of civil society in Spain, with all the comments regarding the ESCR-Net of the United Nations. I thank everyone for being here with us, and in particular our panel members. It is going to be Irene of the member organization of the ESCR-Net, also Javier Rubio. He is the head of the advisory board and legal affairs, and also a member organization of our net, which is the historic issues of this case, and also the work of a series of entities in Spain, given the right for housing in this country and the involvement of the ESCR-Net in the region. On my behalf, I would like only to say and to thank that the collaboration with the ESCR-Net in Spain, with two projects regarding the working group in the strategic litigation. The first with interventions of amicus of international cases and the United Nations mechanisms, and second, doing some work in order to strengthen the international mechanisms for the implementation of decisions of human rights, and also to try to move forward in the implementation of concrete cases. The webinar today is an opportunity in order to remember the work done by the coalition in Spain and several members of the ESCR-Net Secretariat. It is also an opportunity in order to give us and to share the main decisions and actions that could come as a result of all of these efforts. They are therefore pioneers because it is the first time in which this formal follow-up mechanism of the decisions of the ESCR-Net are used by the civil society. Now let me give the floor to Irene of the ESCR Observatory, and then Marta will be talking for about 30 minutes, and then we will have some time for Q&A. Since we do have interpreters for Spanish and English into Spanish, only one person may be taking the floor at the webinar. It is very important to please speak slowly and directly to the microphone for the interpretation purposes. If you need to take the floor, please press your icon. And if you have an urgent comment, please click if you have any questions on the question mark. I thank you again, and let me now give the floor to Irene of the ESCR-Net. Irene, the floor is yours. Hello, good afternoon. First of all, let me thank the ESCR-Net for organizing this webinar. I think it is important to be able to connect ourselves in different cases, but basically I also believe that we're not going to be taking half an hour, because I think it's important to see the questions that the webinar members have from other countries. I really believe that what is truly important is that this is a pioneer, but we're going to see how we can work with the enabling protocol of the ESCR-Net. So I believe the development of this case is very important, but also the following cases, not only this first case. So then we need to work as a net and to share experiences and ways of acting in other latitudes and regions. Let me start talking. Let me then give the floor to Javier Rubio, then Fernando, and then Marta Mendiola, that she's in the follow-up group. We are all members of the organizations of the group that I will talk to you. Now, the webinar is to talk about the implementing process in Spain, but I think it's also important to share that the experience of what we work with the ESCR-Net and other organizations has been a very interesting experience because we were able to complement with with Javier Rubio, what we implemented in Spain in regards to the decisions. This has to do basically with a leasing contract. I think that the collective work is quite interesting. Well, let me share with you on the screen the first presentation regarding our legal claim. This is first, we created the follow-up group. We had also the Amicus Curia group, and the elements should be taken into account. Also the first launch actions and the challenges for the future. Now, how we have drafted the Amicus Curia. Well, this is very important to be taken into account because somehow we're a part of the whole procedure. So the civil society takes access to the case, and that means that the members of the ESCR-Net could learn about the case. We also had a rapporteur participating in this. At the moment of presenting this legal claim, the civil society took a very relevant role. The second element was the creation of the follow-up group. The follow-up group in Spain, which the housing issue has been a major problem. We started with this problem since 2008, 2009, and we have seen different groups that are looking for housing through social movements. I think this is very important by some of the lawyers with a series of lawyers. As a result of this, we got in touch with those that we already knew regarding the fact that we were involved in the housing issues. And we have been a part of other environments and participated in other environments. We had Javier Rubio. We also had Caritas and other different organizations. I think it's important to take into account given mortgage issues, which is something that was known internationally, and that actually we had the participation of all of them. It is not only what has to do with human rights organizations or human rights defenders and their involvement, but it is through this net that we have organized other elements that we consider to be relevant. For example, since we have now syndicates created with different tenants of houses, this has been the initial part, and we have provided a follow-up of their work, but we actually have to be fully informed of what is happening and participating in this. Then we also created these neighbor associations These are neighborhood associations that are quite strong within our cities. And we also included people from Madrid and Barcelona, the neighbors associations, and other areas. But if you could be participating in the follow-up group. Then we also have also the Union of Lawyers in Spain is also going to be participating. And they are lawyers working in favor of housing and human rights areas. We have email groups and Skype groups because we have different Spanish organizations. I think it's also important in the presentation that we made to the media regarding the presentation of the follow-up group, and the work with our media is quite important, and we have to manage it quite well. We have tried by giving them some minutes, some reports, some press releases in order to clarify communication. The goals here were, of course, the follow-up in regards to general decisions. But as we know, this decision was talking about the fact that the enabling protocol and the presence of it and the possibility that the ESCR-Net and its committee could follow up these decisions. So to report about all of these decisions and inform of them is very important. Now, the elements that have to be taken into account previously for the implementation of the decisions. Well, we have to take into account what each state has within its own tools to incorporate within the human rights system, its legal internal order and concepts. And in Spain, they do not have a human rights office. We do have a human rights office, but it is connected with the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Spain for integration and interactions with countries in the south. Very recently, we have had a structure in the Ministry of Justice that is implemented in order to follow up all of these decisions. I mean, these are some key issues that took place in Spain. For example, recently, we have, for example, an incorporation to the committee in regards to the United Nations Women's Rights Committee. So it needs some changes. This decision reached the Supreme Court of Spain, and the decision was the fact of incorporating the ESCR-Net concepts and rights. Of course, we can deepen in this understanding, but since we didn't have this, this was making it very difficult to have some advocacy with the government, for example, regarding a housing case where we had to involve public works, housing developmental ministries, and foreign affairs, and together with the Committee of Human Rights in the ESCR-Net committee. We had to identify which was really the office in charge of looking after this. In this case, it was the United Nations. Well, we had some key issues. These were part of the first things we did within the group. We had some rapporteurships regarding the adequate housing. There are different legislations in different countries. And then at the state and regional area to see if this would be determining the recommendations. The recommendations, we have to see the legislative sector of it, of the protocol, of the way of acting that has to do with the government that is dealing with this. But sometimes we need to have also legislative implementations, and here it is important to see how the lower house could be working this at different levels. You know, presenting, for example, different documents at the regional halls for decision-making processes. And they've been collaborating with us. And then after this, we have identified that the judicial branch is a key element. There is a very complicated work with the judges. But if they recognize the binding character of this agreement at the moment of implementing preventive measures, they will take into account the general elements that have to be implemented, but also issuing preventive measures whenever necessary. This is a summary of what I have been talking to you about, the measures implemented, how the group was implemented, being in touch with the press, the work with the people's advocacy, also the people's defenders work, also interaction with parliamentarians, also the report of follow-up of compliance with this decision, and working together with other platforms where all the housing policies will be in agreement with the decisions issued by the committee. Now let me give the floor to Javi. I wanted to share with you the work of our platforms. But I think that within the ESCR committee, and we have to connect this with the decisions. There are many organizations that are coordinated in the drafting of different reports before the ESCR committee. This has to do with the Spanish environment. Many of them are not in the follow-up, but since they are involved with the housing area, the idea is to have all of these reports and be sending them over to Geneva to be monitored and followed up by the ESCR-Net. We also have to see all the different claims regarding the implementation of the enabling protocol, and it is in this sense we are a part of the follow-up committee, but also we are part of the organizations that are presenting the enabling protocol. As a result of these decisions, we have to interact with the different parliamentarian groups. Let me conclude. We have created a group I'm sorry, I missed her now. I cannot hear what the lady is saying. Hello again. Irene, it seems to be that the last part on the screen, uh, your screen is frozen now, so I will try to give you back the floor so you can conclude your participation. Let me see if we can hear you now. No, we cannot hear what Irene is saying. Now it's Javier Rubio. Apparently, there is a technical problem with Irene's image and audio. So let me now give the floor to Javier Rubio Gil for his presentation. Thank you. Javier, the floor is yours. Good afternoon to all of you. I hope that you can hear me okay. As a member of the follow-up group of the civil society to the Spain for the compliance of the decision in regards to the MBD versus Spain, and to continue with what Irene has explained, and also let me say in regards to the actors with whom we have been interacting to achieve a better implementation of the general recommendations of this case, that the first actor that we addressed was the People's Defenders. This is the Spanish People's Defense Office, with whom we have had and opened a dialogue with different periodical meetings and communications also on writing, quite fruitful in our personal opinion. On the one hand, the People's Defenders in Spain, as a result of this ruling and thanks to our promotion, has embraced its role as a national institution of human rights in the framework of the International System for the Protection of Human Rights. This is the national human rights institution that we have in Spain. Up to this moment, the People's Defense had not embraced this role in a decisive, open, and public way, and therefore the process of follow-up for this decision, the People's Defenders addressed us from that position and with that function in place. And this is how we have started in this activity a dialogue with the ESCR committee and a series of requirements to different instances of the central Spanish government structure. And also human rights has opened up a full investigative process in the Justice Department that have to do with their competence to housing issues. Now the central administration is now trying to avoid their responsibility of the right implementation of this decision, and also decentralization of competencies at the regional and state level within Spain. As you know, in Spain, in different governments and administrations, and there are different competence levels. Now, this is a very complicated issue that in the area of housing is even more complicated when we talked about decisions and evictions. And now this is serving the central ministries to try to face the People's Defenders and to direct the responsibility of these decisions to other administrations by asking them to implement it appropriately, correctly. At the same time, the People's Defense started a dialogue with the CESCR and becoming, by doing this, a relevant actor in the follow-up process. In the follow-up procedure, as part of the civil society, also we do have the People's Defense as a national institution of human rights. So in the meantime, with the role of the People's Defense. We consider it to be very valuable, and also an experience within the implementation process by adding new allies to the compliance of this decision. And as Irene has mentioned already, Spain responded after 6 months, a little later, in a very limited way, without really responding to the bottom of what was asked in this general recommendations. So this was a call of attention by the people's defenders. Even they have requested that this in itself is to be published in the official gazette of the state. That means that it will be mentioned in the digital concept where all of the public standards that are of the binding nature for the state and for the citizens under this jurisdiction. On the other hand, a part of the People's Defense, we have identified the judicial branch, and from the follow-up group, we have been addressing the General Board of the Judiciary Board in Spain, which is an institution representing the judiciary sector. And here, at the moment of telling them that we need to comply with this decision in areas such as the proportionality trial, and to allow any eviction judicially authorized, or any housing alternatives previous to the eviction, or the necessary coordination with judiciary bodies and also public administrations with competence in social work, how we can synchronize both environments in these social intervention, avoiding all this abandonment of families or persons in high vulnerable conditions. Now, given this situation, the judiciary branch has been a bit more skeptic and reluctant to reintegrate fully the conclusions of this decision. Such is the case that they are somehow alleging independence, autonomy of the judiciary bodies to implement the law. And I mean, they take all of this in order not to issue any direct concrete instructions regarding the value and the impacts of this decision. I mean, they are alleging judiciary independence, not to put this decision in place and its implementation, and they're only considering that every judge is independent to interpret the law in any way they consider, and that their decisions are not just considered giving any different remedies. I mean, this is the fact that they cannot address all judges. This is how we have agreed with them, that through internal communication, through their internal minutes, they will disseminate this decision. They will publish this decision with no recommendation in a very direct way. Well, they will deliver this decision among all of the judges, together with other relevant reports that they have within their circular notes or minutes. We have opened up the possibility of hosting a seminar or a workshop for judges regarding the decision, the follow-up, and the compliance of this decision. Also, as Irene was mentioning, we have also interacted with the parliamentarian group. We held an event in the Spanish Congress to report this decision and its implementation in February of 2018. I mean, we didn't have a lot of representatives attending this event, but nevertheless, it was the first approach of this international decision that is involving the housing problem in Spain and then thanks to other entities in Spain that have integrated a platform regarding the ESCR platform, net, and also a working group of interparliamentarians within the Congress for the follow-up of the compliance of the recommendations of the CESCR recommendations. Also, in 2018, Spain approved the exam of the periodic compliance of the ESCR. These are some of the stakeholders that we have identified, and in recent time, let me add that within our work with the civil society, we have seen that there is a greater dissemination now of the different social movements and the possibility of appealing to the enabling protocol to ask for an habeas corpus given the violation of rights that are not protected by internal courts, in such a way that this is now happening more frequently, and basically in regards to evictions, the use of the request of remedies or preventive measures, not remedies but preventive measures. Article 5 of the protocol is becoming of general implementation. We have had about 70 decisions of the CESCR decisions in Spain that have suspended the evictions given the use of the enabling protocol in communications that are asking for the adoption of provisional measures following Article 5 of the enabling protocol. Also, the follow-up group, we're trying to disseminate and having an outreach of these tools and developing an awareness. This is all on my behalf, and these are the comments that I wanted to share with you so far. I thank you. We thank Javier Rubio. Let me now give the floor to Marta Mendiola. Well, hello to all of you, and as my colleagues have stated, let me thank the ESCR-Net, this webinar that I think is quite interesting for everyone for those of us who are participating. I have just a few things to add to what has been shared by my colleagues, but I would like certainly to share with you the context, the political context that Spain has at this point. We have an administration that, as you know, had a motion of censorship, and it is the Socialist Party which has a minority, and they have to do different political compacts to move forward. Now, we have presented some public budgets for next year because the government is lacking the previous agreements for this. This is the political context that I think it's important to share. We do not know if this government will be in place for 1 or 2 more years, so the political advocacy becomes quite difficult with this political uncertainty. Now, in regards to the executive branch, as a follow-up group, we have requested for meetings. We have had some contact with the fomenting ministry that has to do with housing. And yes, we have had a few interactions, but it is becoming very complicated that this interaction is far more constant or with more periodical and with better approaches. Now we have attended to many public events where the government is committed to draft a housing policy. We have created an interministerial group, which is a good idea to begin with, that the government will understand that not only The Ministry of Housing is the fomenting ministry, but also Justice and Economics Ministry have something to say in the housing area. Now, the working group has been integrated. We have requested for more information with our calendar. We have shared our availability to be consulted, but on the governmental side, there is a different request in this area. Now, giving the Ministry of Justice, we have also appealed, as my colleagues have expressed, in order to achieve the implementation of the decisions of the CESCR decisions, and we have taken advantage of the different cases in which the CESCR has issued measures, and so the judicial bodies in Spain. Well, we have also informed the Ministry of Justice all of these decisions for them to at least have information given this lack of compliance of these preventive measures. With the legislative branch, with the parliament, well, yes, we have had meetings, as it has been mentioned by Irene and Javier, and also to share with you the fact that shortly we will have some legislative opportunities because there is a reform of the urban leasing processes that will be presented in the parliamentarian area, and it will be political advocacy to reform legislation regarding the rental processes, the leasing processes, and also the mortgage situations. I mean, Javi and Irene could explain this, but this is an act for the right of housing that the parliamentarian group has presented. And then it is a good scenario, therefore. So the housing issue will be in the political agenda and will be considered a legislative reform. We have also used some statistics for the increase of evictions to measure and to develop an awareness, because this is getting a worsened situation. I mean, for example, we have evictions given the lack of payment of rent. We have gone back to the figures of 2010 for the second and the third quarter of the year, and we also have made public communication through social networks with concrete cases in which the courts were not complying with the different activities. All of this reminding you a bit of the 2017 decision regarding Spain, but also in order to keep the agenda in place and to create a culture and more pressure, so jurisdictional bodies will consider that all of these preventive measures are of binding nature. I believe that it is very important now that within the Spanish context, to improve some of the communications that are being sent to the committee by different lawyers, is to have, we were talking about this in the group, of inviting someone of the request unit of the treaty bodies that will, have a session training lawyers, another specific session training judges, and with the intention of improving their training of lawyers and the legal sector in this line, on this line. I don't have anything else to add. This is what I have to share with you. I thank you so much. Well, we thank you to all. We thank all of the panel members. Now, I would like to take this chance to receive your questions or comments through the chat box. If anyone would like to request the floor, please make sure you'll press the icon where you have a hand, and that will allow us to know that you wish to take the floor. Also, if there are any questions, you can post them right on the chat channel, right here on the screen. As moderator, I would like to ask the first question. Whomever is considering the litigation process before the United Nations and you're sharing the experience of what we have here in Spain with many examples. But if I heard you correctly, you were talking about 70 eviction cases. Given the right of housing in Spain, that means 70 requests. And I would like to ask the effect of these requests of preventive measures in regards to concrete individual cases. And I also would like to ask in regards to the efforts in public policy advocacy. I wonder who would like to answer to this question. Let me give the floor to Javier Rubio. Hello again. Well, the request must be around 60. It is not a precise number yet, but this is in all of the national territory. But I think this is another political situation that Marta was relating to you, and it has to do with how they are infringing in a systematic way the housing situation in Spain, given the evictions, and of course the remedy of preventive measures, and the CESCR is a part of those elements that does not have foreseen the protection of the right of housing as such in its legal framework. This facilitates the resource of an eviction, and it allows us to adopt preventive measures by the CESCR. And we add to this the presence of organized networks through the different platforms, housing different groups, activists, people that are affected by this. And this is present all over the national territory in Spain, and with a very high level of communication with the different groups. Well, then the knowledge to articulate these requests have been disseminated, and given this, that this is a daily situation of infringement of the right of housing, well, this is why this remedy is so surprisingly implemented. The outcomes are being quite diverse, and we have judicial decisions of the decision adopted by the CESCR, where they adopt their decisions when they have suspended the eviction, as it is established by this CESCR decision, and others do not admit this within their process, and this is how they continue with the implementation, or they suspend it given other reasons that prevent them from this following this CESCR decision and other players, and of course they will. It is of mandatory nature in regards to the judiciary branch. So we have a bit of everything, and we are at this point in a phase of problems for the implementation before the judicial branch, given lack of knowledge and other reasons also. Quite often you know, the reports that get to them just a few hours before the eviction. Normally, victims of the eviction are the ones that issue this communication, and this is not done through the lawyers. They do it on their own. And I mean, all of this has to do with the pressure, but this is now reaching lots of judges, and they're not giving it a mandatory condition. This is why we need to develop internal training within the judicial branch now, but so far the results are unequal given some different decisions. I mean, there are some implementation. Sometimes we have 100% of the implementation is followed. Sometimes we're only at 50%, and it changes constantly. Well, I thank Javier for his presentation. There is also a comment from Marta. Yes. Well, I don't know. I think also that on behalf of the government, when what Irene was sharing with us at the beginning, the Ministry of Justice had a head office of international cooperation, and now at this during this past month of August, they have adopting measures for the implementation of the decisions of the bodies of the treaty. But the explanation of this expansion of the mandate of this office that the government has, well, there are problems in the implementation of the decisions of international bodies. So yes, I do believe that there is an executive, there are problems and they are in the scope of the executive branch, and there are more problems coming up. As we can see, what we have informally learned is that that office is not fully aware of how to move in regards to this mandate. Now, to your question, Fernando, this high number of evictions and cases that are reaching the committee, and how this is influencing the advocacy regarding housing issues, I am somehow more pessimistic about it, because I think that, well, I mean, it has relevance, but the executive branch is not yet adopting measures at the height of this housing crisis that the state is now living through. Well, we thank. Let me open up the space for other comments or questions. There is a question from Joy Chowdhury.
Hello. Hi.
Hola.
I have a question for Javier and Irene and Marta. I guess my question is, after we submitted we utilized the follow-up process and did our submissions, did you hear back from CESCR beyond an acknowledgement that they received the submission? And do you know if they continue to dialogue with Spain in any way? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. No sé.
Gracias por su pregunta. This is a question, and I wonder who would respond to this question of the three different panel members. Let's see who would like to answer. We have another question from Francesca. Let's hear to this question, and then we will be able to respond to the two questions because we have limited time. Francesca Ferruglio.
Hello, hi. Sorry, I have with the video, so I'll keep the mic on. I wanted to ask about you mentioned how linking this process with the periodic review of Spain with the committee has helped to strengthen both processes, both from a civil society point of view, because you had more allies, and also because the committee could really look at the issue of housing through an economic policy lens, I would say, and also give broader recommendations to the state. So my question is around the plans you have for advocating for the implementation of the recommendations, the concluding observations, that have come out of the report of the periodic review of Spain. And as you know, particularly through the follow-up procedure that has led the committee to identify 3 recommendations for follow-up. So that was my question. Thank you.
Ahora esperamos para.
Let's see who would like to respond to the questions. Marta, very good. Well, I will start with some of the questions, but Irene and Javi, I mean, you can collaborate later. Now, in regards to what information we have regarding if the committee has started a dialogue with Spain, well, we don't have any knowledge of this dialogue, if it's there or not. Now, in regards to the question of the periodic review has reinforced the recommendations of the committee with the decision of 2017. I believe that is the case. Yes, it has helped. Yes, it is a different moment of political pressure for the government to remind the government a year later that they have not complied with this decision of 2017. But I also believe that these recommendations of the committee of this year 2018 are just so detailed in the area of housing. I also think that it has to do with the information level that the civil society has sent to the CESCR in regards to what is happening in Spain. So I think they have follow-up both things. Now, regarding future plans of using the follow-up procedure, well, we will be using it. Also, we have now an opportunity with the universal periodic review that the civil society can also check an alternative information regarding the compliance of Spain and the recommendations in the housing area. We will do this. And also when the executive branch will be presenting the state budgets that they have issued their political will of increasing the public resources directed to housing in 30% next year. If this takes place, well, we will do advocacy with the parliament in order to increase these resources. Because in accordance to the government, not even in 2 years, we will be getting back the public investment that we had in the housing area previous to the crisis. And also, the training with the judiciary sector is also very important. Now, I assume that Irene and Javi will have something else to share. Well, thank you very much. Irene, Javier, is there anything you would like to add? Well, I think we have come to our limit time of our webinar. It is time to finish our webinar now. Let me thank once again all of you that have followed this webinar. The recording of this webinar will be disseminated to the different offices and also the PowerPoint information. And we hope that this was a useful discussion. It was quite enriching for all of us to hear your points of view. And once again, let me thank the participants for the opportunity of sharing your points with all of us. And well, then good day, good evening, and good night to all of you around the world. Thank you so much.